Hi, and welcome to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm Ange MacCabe, CEO and co-founder of Intuity Performance. I'm a performance coach, HR professional, whole person leadership facilitator, and your host. The Human Side of Business podcast is fueled by the genuine curiosity to understand how personal characteristics and skills can be leveraged to drive individual and team performance, tangible outcomes, and ultimately organizational success within business. Each podcast is devoted to sharing knowledge, expanding our learning edges, and exploring the trends in corporate culture towards growing the emotional intelligence of organizations. I'm so glad you're here. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. It's been a while, Scott, hasn't it?
It has been. I think our last recording was sometime just before the summer. And maybe not for our guests, for us at least.
Yes, exactly. We took a little bit of a hiatus, and I'm really excited to kind of jam and discuss what that refresh looks like and some exciting news in store as well for our listeners.
No, it is. It is. All right. Kick us off. What's the exciting news?
All right. So as any business owner endeavors, we have conversations, right? Conversations specifically about strategy, how we're feeling about things and how things are going, what's working, what's not working. And the awesome thing about the partnership that I have with Scott is that we're both coaches. So we can also sense when things aren't jiving and have opportunities to ask those deeper questions. And so based on a discovery, which we'll unpack here shortly, I'm going to put Scott in an awkward, the hot seat, I guess. After we've unpacked this, we discovered that we want to pivot for our subscribership or our listeners. And we want to ensure that we're really effective in giving information that makes sense. At the end of the day, what we landed on was a new title, The Human Side of Business podcast, and new intentions and observations throughout this process that I think is real and authentic and meaningful in the sense of how businesses grow and evolve.
I'll definitely touch on the grow and evolve piece. And I mean, I think we're on episode 90, if I'm not mistaken, on the Elevate Business podcast. We had been doing it for, I'd say, a year and a half, 2 years almost.
Almost 2 years.
Actually, yeah, we're coming up on our 2-year partnership anniversary in October. We're recording this now at the end of August. So yeah, about a year and a half, I guess, podcasting. And so we're both doing the dual podcast approach, as most of our listeners, I hope by now would have caught on to. When we bring on a guest, the guest would be, usually a leadership position and be talking about, what's going on in their business and how are they showing up as a leader and things along those lines. And, I think one thing led to another. And to your point, you brought up, as a business, we have to think about how are we spending our time? How are we progressing and moving forward? And I know it was me that kind of, I guess, either raised the flag or had the flag prodded. Where I'm not very direct. Ange is much more direct than I am, and not in a bad way. That's not what I mean. But
no.
Yeah, I kind of raised my hand a little bit, saying, you know what, I think we can use time a little bit differently and make, and we had conversations around the pivot, around what we now will call the Human Side of Business podcast, and what that looks like. And I think at the end of the day, it kind of came down to, leveraging our expertise and where we're at. And for me, one of those things was actually taking a step back a little bit from the podcast and focusing on some other business endeavors and things that we've really been working on from a human skills perspective, from a building our business perspective. And I'll pass the mic back over to you.
It has nothing to do with my strong personality though, right, Scott?
No, of course not. No.
I'm just poking. And I think that you have many valid points in the sense of we're all feeling it, especially over the past 18 months plus. We're stretched for resources, for capital, for cash flow, et cetera. And, although Intuity Performance is doing extremely well, considering our environment, we are cognitive that we're still a small, scrappy team. And what you brought to the table, Scott, was extremely pragmatic from a visionary perspective and saying, hey, look, love where this is going in the sense of having a dual podcast, but would it make sense depending, or I guess pertaining to where we want to grow and the goals that we're looking to achieve. So I really appreciate it, quite frankly, you coming to the table because, I know anyway, Scott, that, sometimes it's hard. It's hard to walk away from things, or it's hard to even bring what we could perceive as an unfavorable conversation to the table. And I loved that you were just like, okay, Ange, hey, I got something that I finally got to tell you. And I was like, all right, let's have it. Let's dump it on the table. Let's figure this shit out and let's move on. So honestly, I was really grateful to have that conversation with you, Scott, so that, it really comes down to the betterment of Intuity Performance and the people that we serve, right?
And I think to your point, I mean, it's uncomfortable, especially I think and I guess I'll classify myself as like the mix of an introvert or extrovert, where like if I'm presenting and things like that, I can be extroverted. But as you know, when it comes to maybe having difficult conversations, it's a growth edge for me. I need to practice being more direct and being more open with what I have to say and standing my ground kind of thing. I'm not standing my ground in the bad sense, but just in saying what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
And so it took a bit of courage on my part to actually come up and say, hey, you know what? I love what we're doing with this, but I would like to take a step back. And I think that, knowing that you're taking this forward makes me feel a lot more comfortable, because I know what you can do and I know how you can show up for others.
Okay.
And I know you'll kick ass moving forward, as I'm sure our guests will know and see as we move forward as well. But I think to the other point of that, it comes back to, we talked about us being coaches and everything else. And we try to use that coach approach with each other in our business partnership and how we show up and everything else. But it's because of that I think it makes it easier to have these types of conversations when we're creating that, it's a bit of a catchphrase sort of say, but like, it's that safe to fail environment. It's that safe to say what's on your mind and we will problem solve together. And I think, because we've really focused on cultivating that, even just as business partners, it makes it that much easier to kind of say, hey, there's this thing going on. I don't necessarily have an answer for it or know what to do about it, but I want to bring it forward and maybe we can figure it out together.
Exactly.
I think taking that approach, it can foster much greater conversations and impact over the long term.
Very much so. And the epiphany actually that I had around this situation, Scott, was that when situations or things feel sticky, it's an opportunity to get to pause and get curious. Because I mean, we've seen it multiple times in different areas of our business as we're growing together, Scott, where it just feels like maybe there's an opportunity for more traction, or that there's just this thing that's gleaning at us, but we're not really sure what it is. And so to come full circle around my epiphany, it's like, okay, when I start feeling like that, I have an opportunity to be a bit more proactive with regards to my curiosity versus sitting back and trying to feel it out, or feeling, what's the right word I'm looking for? Feeling like I'm sensing something's not working, but not able to attach the what. So therefore I can't talk about it. So I actually have grown in this situation too, Scott, in the sense that when it comes to your organization, or even from a leadership perspective, that just kind of throwing things out there every once in a while, if you see a trend or you feel like something is not working, it's okay to have those conversations too, without having the answer, or without having a resolve right away to propose, or without having a debatable point, right? It's okay to kind of feel your way through conversations, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at.
I like the way you describe, like, feel your way. It's not like putting it on the table and say, hey, this is what's going on, but rather say, hey,
No.
I feel like this might be going on.
Right.
And I think we both will attest to this, that we've noticed that, you know what, if you're feeling something, the other person or other people in the situation are probably feeling something too.
Very much.
And so the longer you put it aside, the longer it goes on unaddressed, it doesn't only just impact you, but impacts everybody else that might be involved in it as well. And so the quicker we can approach that with a sense of curiosity versus judgment, you know, there's so much better that can come from it.
And I'm curious, like, I feel like this is the almost how to quick to fail environment. Do you know what I mean? Like, so part of the quick to fail environment is being able to have high levels of trust and transparency.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is feeling your way through those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we know that we have our hearts in the right place with regards to this podcast. But at the same time, it makes me think, how can we further elevate ourselves in the sense of testing things out? So from a Scott and Ange perspective, I feel like this is a huge win, because it's like, hey, we're only a year and a half into this, and we're starting to pivot to try new things again for our audience and for the betterment of the information that we're putting out there. Yeah. So I think that as we feel our way through these things, like building the podcast and continuous conversations as a partnership, that there's only opportunities and growth that's ahead of us for sure.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, Ange. I think to your point, the podcast is just one thing that we're addressing now. But when we started thinking about other conversations we have in the business, and we're talking a lot about like Intuity in our own business here, but only because I think it relates to other business owners and to other leaders out there, and what they can kind of bring into their business.
Right.
But coming at it from that curious perspective, and then being able to look at this thing and now adapt it, depending on how we can move forward. I mean, yeah, that fast to fail environment really can foster there.
And I think that it's an attestment to, walking the walk and talking the talk around culture, because one of our values is accountability. Another one has to do with transparency, right? So this kind of backs into it. And, to lend more information from a culture perspective, we've actually created a lot of acronyms here at Intuity Performance, and I contribute that to Scott in his proficient way to systematize things. And so where I'm going with this, Scott, bear with me, is we use this thing called KJ. So this is my knee-jerk reaction. And it doesn't mean that this is my final position or my final statement, but based on the question that you're asking me right now, or the conversation at hand, here's how I'm initially reacting to it. So how I'm feeling, how I'm showing up right now, and my initial thoughts. Is it okay if we continue this conversation? And this really backed into part of the podcast pivot, because, we sensed some things, we had conversations, we had some KJs, and then we got strategic as to, okay, so let's take a step back. What's the objective of our podcast? And I think that's a great transition for us to jump into, to tell everybody what's going on and what are we seeking to achieve with regards to the human side of business podcast.
Yeah. And so I guess I'd love to have you share with the audience, I guess, what they can expect moving forward. I think if I could jump in, not taking, and I guess maybe clarify that I'm not going to be completely leaving the podcast. I think we'll still be able to have, some Ange and Scott jam sessions on specific topics. And we're going to be looking forward to continuing to, I think, have more of those. If anything, I feel like we only had a few of them in the past 90 episodes. And if anything, it'll be something we can build on moving forward. But where you'll be taking the lead on the podcast. And why don't you tell us a little bit more? What can we expect from the Human Side podcast?
Definitely. So the intention is to get much more informational based. So we strongly believe here at Intuity Performance around the how-to, not just the what or the why. And we're doing it more of what I would call a hybrid approach, in the sense of Ange and Scott jam sessions that you can hear us talk and do a deep dive on certain human-centric topics. And in other circumstances, we're going to do a bit more of an interview style, or maybe some playful banter with our podcast participants that jump on. And really what it comes down to is normalizing the human side of our business. So talking about behaviors and competencies and our human-centric approach to leadership. Also talking about some of the blunders that come up when it comes to leadership and learning opportunities, not from a space of negativity and reflection, but rather being able to level with people in a real way. Because we've all been in situations where we've done an excellent job in leadership and then maybe not so great and had opportunities to learn. So we're really excited to engage with leaders that are really like-minded in the sense of backing into vulnerability and resiliency, and really are passionate about the people that they serve within their organizations. And there's a whole host of topics that comes up under this. So, it's the things like talking about our teams in the hybrid world, and what's coming up for us, and what new problems do we need to solve. Other things can back into more of that emotional intelligence space, because there's just so much to talk about, because it is a strong basis from a leadership perspective. And it's just that continuous curiosity around the human side of our business that I'm super excited about to bring to the table.
No, that's awesome, Ange. And I think, building off what you said, we're really looking for, real people and leaders and managers to be able to, show up and be vulnerable around
Right.
the good and the bad, and to take that deep dive that you mentioned around those human-centric processes, or maybe processes isn't the right word, but maybe the human-centric approaches. There's
That's
the
where your
C
mind goes,
coming
though,
in
is
there. Like,
process.
yeah, it's all about the processes. No, but
Yeah.
the people
I
side of
think
things.
I think what I'm hearing, Scott, is like, as a leader, how do I figure out my blind spots and how do I talk about them? Because, when we think about it from a spectrum perspective, in some circumstances, we can pick up on those things. In other circumstances, it takes a problem to solve or an occurrence to happen before we can see those blind spots. And really talking about that day-to-day stuff. So if I'm going from a manager to a leadership position, what do I expect? What type of conversations do I need to have with my team members to set myself up for success? And then, obviously, what's been going on a lot in organizations and our environment is, what do we do when the vibe is low or the energy's low? How do we engage with people? How do we do it so that they understand that we're not just checking a box, that we're really looking to be concerned with regards to our team members and help create a stable organization? Because at the end of the day, there's more and more expectation put on companies, including us here at Intuity Performance, for the well-being of our team members. So I think that's really important too.
Yeah, no, you touched on all the points there. That's awesome.
Yeah, cool. Trying to think. So when it comes to the podcast, Scott, what else can you tell our viewership to expect out of us, in the sense of how often we're going to show up? Because we used to be weekly, so there's a little bit of a pivot there too.
Yeah. And so I guess talking about the logistics of the podcast, I think we're looking to pivot more as a bi-weekly podcast. And so giving a little bit more space for our listeners to be able to enjoy and really kind of reflect back on a podcast. I think that's one of our goals, is to be able to, share the information, share the how-to, but also have people be able to walk away and have an opportunity to really think about it and see how it applies to their situation. And so we like the idea of testing out and experimenting with this bi-weekly podcast format. I think for the most part, it'll be more one-on-one interviews. I know actually we have an up-and-coming one. It'll actually be two business owners and Ange, and I'm really looking forward to that one with Phil and Kenny.
Me
That'll
too.
be an exciting episode to tune into. I'll give you a little spoiler alerts here.
Right.
But otherwise, I mean, what you can expect from Ange, either go back to our past episodes and check in, and you'll know exactly. But if you haven't had the opportunity yet, and this is your first time tuning in, you can expect somebody that really takes the time to think about how to dive into things further and to bring them to the actual side, and who at times can actually be a little bit stubborn when we stay too high level, and actually wants to dig deeper and wants to really be able to understand what is happening behind the scenes, understand the why of things. And I think it's a great trait that she brings into not only our business, but also into the podcast world. And really looking forward to having to put the guests in the hot seat instead of me. And building off of that.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And I mean, to be totally honest too, to add to it from a business experience perspective, we've looked at it and identify, does it matter if we do weekly versus biweekly, and what do our viewership want from us right now? And so I think it's really important to go back and test things, like just as you had said, Scott, in the sense of what's working for everyone collectively from both a business perspective and both as what we're offering to you as our subscribership. So I'm super excited to see how things roll out. We have a great lineup already set up. I think we have a good handful plus of people that are signing up, and there's other opportunities to reach out to us as well. If you're interested and you're a leader in a leader position, we'd love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, no, that's great, Ange. So we're doing a call out? Is this a call out to any leaders or managers who would be willing to be in the hot seat with you and talk about the good and the bad about their leadership?
Yeah, I think that would be a great challenge to put out there if anybody's willing to accept it.
All right, let's do it then. And so maybe we'll share in the show notes where you can reach out to us. And just reach out. Let us know you're interested in joining the Human Side of Business podcast, and we'll touch base and we can have a quick chat.
Fantastic. I think that's a wrap. Super excited to see where this goes and to launch the next episode of the Human Side of Business podcast.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay. We'll catch you again soon. Take care.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm glad you could join us. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay updated with our latest content, make sure to visit our website. The link can be found in the episode description, where you can subscribe to the podcast, sign up for our newsletter, and learn more about our whole person leadership services. Sounds interesting? Explore the Whole Person Leadership Cohort by Intuity Performance, a unique program that offers unparalleled support to managers on every step of their leadership journey. Our program features evidence-based assessments, workbooks, group coaching, and interactive learning experiences to help you level up your leadership skills. Reach out today to apply to one of our upcoming cohorts. Until next time, take care and stay curious.